Welcome, everybody, to Cinema A to B. Today, we're going to be talking about Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves. Came out this year, 2023. I know, Ben, you've recently seen it. I've seen it now, I believe twice. So let's dive right in. What did you think about it?
It is better than it has any right to be. But I say that as the ultimate compliment. You know, you go into these kinds of movies, I do at least, with really low expectations. And because the Dungeons and Dragons property has just not had good movies, like not at all. They've had good actors. I mean, Jeremy Irons was in one, for crying out loud, but this is good. This is good. It knows what it is. The tone's right. The script is good. It's witty. I loved watching this. I didn't see it in the theater. I watched it here at the house, but had a blast. The narrative was fun. It was heartfelt when it needed to be. It was mostly funny and quippy. And yeah, this is kind of the sleeper movie, like a sleeper studio picture from 2023.
Yeah, it was. So I'm the same way. I went in with not low expectations, but definitely wasn't going in thinking this was going to be a masterpiece, which obviously it's not. It's definitely got its flaws, but thoroughly enjoyed it with, I'm play D&D, so I know some of the stuff. So, really rooting for this to be good, like a lot of fantasy movies, read a lot of fantasy books, do all that. And so they really did this right, not in just kind of the storyline, kind of what you were talking about, but also they did a lot of fun nods to people who play D&D, who've read the books, especially read like players' hand guides or the different races or whatever, like little small nuggets. Again, kind of going back to what I've dealt on, fan service, but it subtle, where if you don't get it, it doesn't detract. You're not sitting there going, wait, what is this? What did this happen? You can just roll along. But if you do know, it's fun. It adds an extra layer of like, I see what you did there. Like, again, this is how you do fan service, is this kind of thing. Really enjoyed a lot of what they did. I do enjoy Chris Pine a lot, and was a little somewhat nervous of him when I first saw the trailer for it, that he was just going to be a little too Chris Piney in this. But I mean, he was very Chris Piney, but he did it well. Like, I like that he was a bard. I like that he kind of had that. It gave him a lot more of that ability to be kind of that charmer and his normal self, and not kind of play it down too much. So I walked away really, really enjoying this film and really happy. They also, I think they kept the fantasy the right amount. Like, it wasn't too heavily focused on everything, or didn't go too high fantasy, because it, how do I say it? It's not grounded, but it felt as close to grounded as you can be in this kind of film, like if you're in a fantasy world. So if they do more, obviously there's stuff that they can do, they can build upon, but I like how this felt a little bit more normal fantasy world. Like, definitely not something like the World of Warcraft film that was just absolutely like super high fantasy, a little too much. And I think this didn't go that route.
So are we gonna play spoiler on this, or are we gonna keep it?
Ooh, let's play spoiler. I mean, come on, like, who's going to really watch this without having watched the film? Like, like people who are like, hey, I don't know what Dungeons and Dragons are. I'm going to listen to it, see if I want to watch the film.
Yeah. And unfortunately, this didn't do particularly well as far as box office concerns. I guess he'll start off with the cast. You're right. Chris Pine kind of rode that line of what he's known for, which is his witty self. But then he was given opportunities to be more emotive and heartfelt, and the story really lends itself to that. I mean, at its core, it's about a father and his daughter. So the whole film, the story's super grounded, which I loved. There's a framework there that's not anything earth shattering, but it's real characters, real people, real emotions, and then it all takes place in the D&D world. And this was kind of the same formula as something like Andor. It's not done as well as Andor, but Andor is really a show about people, the struggle for survival, oppression. This is the same kind of deal. It's about relationships, and multiple characters had really good arcs. I really liked this Justice Smith that plays Simon, the sorcerer. I really liked his character, and his arc was really good. And the humor is peppered really nicely. This Rege-Jean Page as Xenk, the paladin, is just the comedy built around his stoicism and interplay with Pine is great. And then tip of the cap to Hugh Grant.
Yeah.
Just kind of a perfect casting decision for him. And you don't really get a chance to see him play a bad guy that often. And he's really good in this, and he's really convincing. So,
and he's not really that like he's evil, but he's not really that. He's just selfish and self-focused, which is just out for himself,
which is probably one of the more believable bad guys we've ever had in a movie. Like you're right. Yeah. He doesn't have the goals of world conquest, and ultimately just is more of a pawn than anything else. But it's kind of real life.
He wants to live the good life.
Yeah. That's
like
most of us.
He wants to have wants to rule a city, wants to live the good life, his face up on things, and not have to truly work too hard, and that's what drives him, and that's, again, like he's the bad guy, but obviously he's not evil in so much, in that case. And I like kind of going back to the character stuff. I like kind of, it talked about kind of seeing these characters in their lowest moments of what they were driven to kind of, Crisp, having to, provide for his family and provide for, those things, and kind of his dealing with his own selfishness and greed, and that, how that kind of built and changed. And
there's some really nice reveals there as far as kind of his responsibility tie into the death of his wife. And the writing's really smartly done in this. I think audience expectations were like mine, really low. And so they just opted not to go watch it. Unfortunately, like who would have guessed that the script is really quite good? And now
the acting is well done.
Yeah. And funny as all get out. And I'm going to spoil it because we are going to play spoiler. The funniest moment for me is when they've got to bring those guys back from the dead.
Yes, absolutely.
And it was brilliant. And I'm not going to go 100% spoiler because I don't need to describe it any more than that. But those moments in the movie, and then the mid credit scene that they set up perfectly for that, was fantastic. And some of that reminded me, there were certain moments, especially in that graveyard, I had serious like Evil Dead and Army of Darkness vibes. Yeah.
100%.
There's a little bit out in there, and a little bit of a nod to Raimi. Yeah. With Army of Darkness. Like it's got a little bit of that feel, except it's a very beautiful, pristine image from 2023.
Also, that scene that where they talk with the dead guys was supposed to be only like one or two, but then they kind of were playing with it and let like people kind of act and improv, and they're like, nope, we're going to do more, this whole montage of things. And like, so they spent a lot more time doing it than they were actually planning on. Or at least that's what I've read, but it was awesome. Oh yeah. It's just, I mean, it's that kind of comic timing, that callbacks, that kind of like that repetitive comedy that just kind of, they did it just enough to make it super funny and then stopped, and they didn't kind of overplay it. Like I wasn't like, okay, can we move on? Like they hit it just enough where I was like, oh, I kind of want more, but like it was good that I didn't get more because it would have lost its luster. But it was. And
now, at first glance, Michelle Rodriguez just looks completely typecast in this movie, and to a certain extent she is, but fortunately, the writing is good enough. She's got an arc too, and kind of breaks with convention of, typically Michelle Rodriguez just plays like a really angst-filled character, and there's really no other dimension to her. That's just kind of, that's kind of what she got relegated to in the Fast and the Furious. That's what she got relegated to in Avatar. And at first you think that's what she's going to be held to in this, but the character's deeper than that. And that that shell kind of evaporates real quickly. About halfway through the movie, you realize, well, this character's got more going on. But I loved that cameo.
Yes.
Of her husband. So good. And I'm like, how did they get him? Like, what are the connections here? Like, is this a group of friends that I'm not aware of? Like, is is he friends with the director or is like he friends with Pine? Because it was just came out of left field, and I was like, oh, that's fantastic.
And it was, probably just him showing up for a day.
Oh,
probably working for scale or some really small amount, just doing a favor. Yeah, I don't know either, because I'm trying to rack my brain of like, he's been in movies with Pine or Rodriguez or like Hugh Grant, and I can't think of a single one that he was in.
No, and maybe they went to him, they said, here's the script. He's like, I'm not available for more than like a day or two, but I'll do it. But it was great. Yeah. It was great.
And maybe he's a big D&D fan. Maybe like that's entirely like he wanted possible. To be a part of it, I mean, you remember like with Star Wars, when Force Awakens, you had so many famous people like wanting to be it.
Oh yeah. You had Daniel like, Craig as a
stormtrooper.
Yeah.
So
maybe I'm surprised I didn't see like Henry Cavill or something in it then.
Yeah. Well, I think he's got his own kind of not issues, but a little too much news around him, and he's now focusing on his Warhammer series, and at the time The Witcher, and so he probably was like, no, you can't go with a competing fantasy series and be in it. Thank you very much.
It's probably true.
I do have to say, I really like the way this movie opens. Like the whole, like the way they have him give the backstory to catch you up is, they did it so well. Like I was completely enthralled. Like I knew what it was. I'm like, this is all exposition, but to put it in that as he's telling a story to get let out was absolutely amazing. Just was done really, really well. And like the fact that he kept stopping to ask about Jonathan, and he was just like, what the heck, where is he? Like I should just wait. And it just kept building and building and building. And here's a fan servicey thing that you probably don't know. Jonathan.
And they're all like, Jonathan.
So Jonathan is the little nerd talk, but Jonathan is in Aarakocra, and the Aarakocra are actually famously against imprisonment and confinement, and like they're very much so. If you know something about it, you're thinking, oh, he wants the Aarakocra there because he's already going to be on his side and vote for him. But no, that was not his plan whatsoever. No. Like, so it's just kind of like if you know something a little like fun fan servicey to kind of like, but then a bait and switch and to throw it off, and so like it was just really enjoyable. And just I love the moment when like he goes back like and then the guy's like, no, you've gone back too far. We've been past that. Like it's just these little tidbit fun comedic moments that just push this story along and kind of gave it somewhat of that, not ride, but just let it flow and let it move forward, but at a good pace, but yet allowed for that to build this world, to build these characters, but then allow for those moments of them to kind of turn around. Too.
Yeah, I just love these movies that know exactly where they sit as far as their tone and seriousness, when to be serious, when not to, what they can get away with. And this just operates in its box better than most. Mm-hmm. The serious moments you buy into and you're like, oh man, yeah, and then most of it is comedic, but then the movie never feels like it's trying too hard. Like it kind of it operates within its plot, and the comedic moments they're well written, but they feel pretty natural. No, this is a good time. I'll watch it again for sure.
Yeah, I love it because it feels pretty much like any type of campaign that you actually play in D&D, where you play it, you try to be serious, but then it just usually rolls into jokes. I mean, like that's of all the games that I've played for tabletop, role-playing games, it always delves into something dumb, and then we all laugh about it and make jokes, or we go off like some random tangent, or our sorcerer is actually not that great of a sorcerer and he's always rolling ones or failing saves, and we got to save him, or he's not really actually doing what he's supposed to do, except for like that one moment when it actually matters, and then it's like, why can't you roll that all the time? So it kind of had that feeling. Like I really felt like, okay, hey, this actually works. This feels like I'm kind of watching Critical Role or watching some actual podcast, but just they're acting it out and instead of just sitting there.
Well, that's great and this is perfect because we are both on kind of the opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to this movie and Dungeons and Dragons, because I've never played D&D. What little I would know of D&D would frankly probably be mostly from Stranger Things, since it's a heavily inspired D&D show, and I've kind of looked up that material, but that's the extent of my knowledge. So you've played the game, you know the lore, you got all that inside, you got most of this inside stuff. I didn't, and I still love this movie. So they nailed it. They nailed it. They knew where to plug that stuff in for the audience that had the knowledge of the game, and then they knew to have a good, fun story for people like me that just aren't well versed in that. So hats off to them for riding that line. Yeah, absolutely.
So while we were talking, I did look up what the box office was for this movie.
Okay,
it's brutal.
Is it brutal?
So it's brutal.
I was probably trying to be too nice.
Well, yeah, it's pretty brutal. So it's saying it's had a budget of about $150 million total. So
I believe it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously outside of marketing and
it was pretty well marketed too.
Yeah, so it's probably that budget's probably 250, 300, really all told with everything in it. So it grossed total worldwide $208 million.
Ouch! And which studio?
This is Paramount Pictures did it. And here's the real kicker. In the US, it did less than $100 million. It did like $93 million in the box office. It did, bit better worldwide, which I mean, obviously most pictures do better worldwide because there's one country versus a whole lot more of them. But still, those are brutal numbers. That's not great.
That's a bomb.
So
that's a bomb. Yeah. And let's look real quick. Remind myself of the release date. Okay, March 31st. So that's not a bad release date. So end of March, that's a movie that tested well. Based on what I remember, that's a movie that tested well, but they're a little uncertain on it going up against anything real strong. So that's not going to get the big July release, and that's not going to get quite to Memorial Day. Right? But end of March is still a really good release date. I mean, that's right around when they released 300. Snyder's 300 was in March because they knew it tested well. They were pretty confident, but they didn't want to put it up against anything real. So this didn't have heavy competition.
You've got a theater going populace that is dwindling. You've got a lot of, I mean, I don't know how they record people who have things like AMC Stubs or Regal Unlimited or Movie Pass. If I go see it, obviously I'm not paying for a ticket price. I've already paid for my monthly subscription. So are they counting that money or how does that work? Actually, I don't really know anymore, but so that could actually be part of the problem now is that you have, people who do go to the theaters and they have access to one of these are probably signing up for this program. And then those people who don't are going to go see the big tentpole things and pay for it. And, they went and probably saw Oppenheimer. They saw Barbie. They see the next Marvel film or Star Wars film, when it comes out. But they may not see much else because they're I can just sit at home and watch it on my
and the other thing is that, I like Chris Pine, but nobody in this is this huge box office draw as an actor.
No.
They're not.
Chris Pine was at one point, I mean, not a big box office draw, but he's definitely, I think he started to pick things that he enjoys doing more so than getting the name recognition. So
yeah, I mean, he blew up with playing young Kirk, and then they tried to relaunch Jack Ryan with him, and unfortunately the script just wasn't good. I don't think it was. I don't think it was a problem with him. I don't think he was a bad casting decision to play young rebooted Jack Ryan, but those movies have just had script problems for a while now.
Yeah. And he was fantastic in, oh my goodness, what was it with Tom Hardy when they played spies or whatever?
Oh yeah, and they're fighting over Reese Witherspoon.
Yes,
that's a good movie.
Fighting over.
Yeah, I forget what that's really called. Probably my favorite movie though that Chris Pine is in though is opposite Denzel Washington. We obviously did Hell or High Water, which is fantastic.
Oh, we are going to be talking about Hell or High Water at some point.
Yeah, we will. So my favorite movie or my favorite movie that Chris Pine's in is probably Hell or High Water, but up there is Unstoppable, the Tony Scott movie with Denzel, where they're on the train.
I've never seen.
You've never seen Unstoppable?
No.
Oh, okay. So
okay,
here's a conversation. This is like probably the first time this happened on the podcast of like, no, you have to watch Unstoppable. Okay. 2010, one of Tony Scott's last films. Chris Pine, Denzel Washington, runaway train, freight train, coming out of like West Virginia or Pennsylvania or something, and it is tremendous.
Okay.
It's a big Tarantino's a huge fan of it. It's like,
yeah. Okay.
So
Unstoppable. So side tangent. We're definitely going to do a season of Cinema A to B that is literally, we find out movies that I've seen and love and can't believe you haven't seen it. And then we also see movies like Unstoppable where you've seen and you can't believe that I haven't seen it. And we're like, that's all it's going to be. So it's like someone who's seen it and, can talk, has enjoyed it for a while, and someone who's fresh and get that dynamic. So that's definitely going to happen because I think that's a fun thing to do. But anyways, back to Dungeons and Dragons. And I got to say, like, I really felt this movie was paced well. Like they had a lot of, like obviously the exposition in the beginning, then it kind of got, a little bit more exposition even after that, but it kind of moved along, but they kind of went different places. They slowed it down, and then we had some action, and then you stopped it and had slowed it down again to build some character building. Then you had some action and so on and so forth. It just felt really well paced I never walked away bored. I never walked away thinking this was way too long. Like I know your typical, like every movie should be about 15 minutes shorter than what it actually is.
Doesn't apply here.
This clocks in at 2 hours, 15 minutes, I believe. And I didn't think there was a lot of fat to trim, if anything. So
I think 2:15 is a good runtime personally. I look back at a lot of movies that I enjoyed, even when I was younger, and they were all like 2:15, 2 hour 20, something like that. I did want to mention that I was not expecting it. I was expecting a movie that was just shot on like 100% green screen with real cheesy effects and bad backgrounds, Yeah. And that's not what we got. They definitely followed the original Lord of the Rings trilogy kind of template of getting some great vistas and actual locations. And I'm looking it up. So they shot on location in Iceland, and then the rest of it's just in the UK and a little bit of Ireland. And I have to say, they found some fantastic locations so they didn't travel as extensively. They didn't travel to New Zealand, but they had some great stuff in Northern Ireland and England. And it's a beautiful movie. It's not all on a soundstage. They got outside and shot some extensive sequences, and yeah.
And ever since we talked about it, I've definitely seen it where you can immediately tell kind of that sound stage and the real life or the on location with that uneven ground of what that looks like. It didn't really occur to me like that was what was missing. And now I can like pinpoint like, oh, that's on the sound stage. Like, oh, no, they actually went on location for that. And you're right. It's so difficult to get that like uneven ground feeling on a soundstage.
So the only movie that I can think of, and we've both seen this film, where they shot on a soundstage, but it was supposed to be outside, and it was convincing, and they built that uneven ground into the set, was The Empire Strikes Back, when they first go to Dagobah.
Yeah.
Because they almost did it out of necessity because because Oz had to operate underneath the stage to move Yoda around. Mm. But they built in that unevenness to the ground. It's not perfectly flat. And it felt right. So, yeah. What's the show I first mentioned that on was,
it was,
Rings of Power?
Mandalorian.
Or Mandalorian. Mandalorian, yeah.
Mandalorian when you talked about it, because we were talking about the volume.
Rings of Power suffers the same problem though.
Yeah.
Where they're shooting on sound stages and the ground's just too level. So just little stuff. I hate that I notice that stuff sometimes.
Well, and I hate now that you forced me to notice it. Gosh.
You're welcome.
But yeah, thanks. But But I do like the paladin in this. I forget his name and who plays him, but the very like stoic, no emotion. Like it's funny that brings so much comedic relief where he just plays it so straight. And he's not even there for he's only there for a little bit. Like joins the party, does a couple things, and then like pieces out. And it's fantastic. When
he's walking away and he's like, is he gonna walk around the rock? Is he gonna walk? Nope, just gonna go right up over it. Just tremendous comedic, just good dialogue. Very good dialogue. It is. You know, when I was watching it, that felt like an inspiration for some of the comedy is that YouTube channel, Viva La Dirt League.
Yes.
Yeah. It has a lot of comedy in common with them. Like it feels. There are times it feels like, what was that, NPC Man? They're running sketch. And if somebody hasn't seen that, by the way, they do a lot on like armor and like pay to win things for all like these big RPGs and MMOs and stuff. Yeah, no, it's so that
it's
kind
really
of humor seems right in line with what's making me laugh in D&D.
I did really like this film, and it's sad that it did so. Like I didn't even know. I knew it didn't do great at the box office, but it's sad that it did so terrible at the box office because it means we're not going to get.
No, and there's no sequel. It's super unfortunate because there's so many. It's such a nice property, and there's so many different places they could go with it. And I know that's why they greenlit it because they're like, oh man, this could be our next big tentpole franchise for Paramount, and no. Yeah, hopefully they do something with it because they definitely who's the director on this and the writers? Like it's definitely it's John Francis Daley and then Jonathan Goldstein, and they wrote and directed, and then there was a third writer, Michael Giglio or Giglio.
Oh my goodness, he's the guy's an actor as well. Oh, he John Francis Daley also helped write Spider-Man: Homecoming.
Yeah, so this is why the writing's so good, right? Yeah. Because, and I should have looked this up before we started.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, he wrote Spider-Man: Homecoming. He wrote Horrible Bosses and Horrible Bosses 2, which their first one's funny movie.
Yeah.
So yeah, these guys have got a nice background in writing comedy, and it just didn't perform. And this just goes to show that just because a movie doesn't do well at the box office doesn't mean it's bad. And I hate that myth. Right. I hate that myth.
Well, and honestly speaking, like it's even different, the farther we go and the more movies that get made and more movies that get produced, a movie has less time in the theater to kind of, build up that momentum, to build up that speed. Like if it doesn't do well and this has been for decades, but if it doesn't do well on the box office in the first weekend, it's a failure, but movies are in the theaters for a couple weeks, maybe a month and a half at most, where like, I remember like sometimes movies would be in for 2 months because you didn't have as much of a turnaround, and you didn't need 4 screens to play the newest Marvel film. You could just put whatever on one screen and you'd have everything else. And now it's like we need to have 70 different showings of the tentpole movies.
Did you look at who John Francis Daley is?
I did not. No.
So you'll recognize him immediately.
Yeah.
He's in Freaks and Geeks. He's totally an actor turned
writer.
Yeah, turned writer director. I had no idea what he was doing. That's tremendous. So he's totally made the transition. I recognized him immediately when I pulled him up. I was like, wait. Yeah, so hats off to him. He's totally made the jump. Because one flop like this isn't gonna. He's got a bunch of stuff in. Both these guys have got a bunch of stuff in production, and Goldstein's quite a bit older.
Yeah. Well, and especially if you help write Spider-Man: Homecoming, that movie did so well. Now, I will say one thing to touch on that I really got from this too was it felt very kind of Monty Python-esque in this, like Holy Grail. Not obviously, definitely not as as crazy or as, tongue in cheek as that. But like, I did get that vibe going kind of through it sometimes with some of the jokes, some of what they were talking about, especially with the dead guys like that. That's feels like very Monty Python trope kind of going on. So that was really enjoyable.
He accidentally asked him like 3 questions, like back to back to back.
Yeah. And he just falls down.
Yeah.
He's like, wait, what? Was that a question? What? How many questions are we at? 4? Can you not answer my questions? No.
Yep.
Or however it goes. Yeah. Like I really butchered that, but still.
He totally burns the first, just totally wastes the first corpse. Like just
like well thought out stuff. You could tell this was a labor of love that they put some effort into it. So
yeah, which again, that makes me sad that it didn't perform, but it's out now. It's totally available to watch it.
Do it. I mean, even critics seem to really enjoy it as well. I mean, I think if I remember correctly, it's got pretty good.
Just didn't translate.
Good
I'm sure it's done. I'm sure it's done fine on the streaming. Mm-hmm. Now, will it make that budget back? Probably not. They're still going to be in the red. Paramount will, from it, but it's a heck of a lot better than that. What was that ridiculous, like fantasy comedy with James Franco and
oh my goodness,
and it has its moments, but like.
No, it does not. I mean, it's terrible.
It is.
It was terrible.
But there's some stuff that makes me laugh, like in that movie.
I gotta look that up now. Which one is that?
I can't even. Oh, Your Highness.
Yeah, and he did it with Danny McBride.
Danny McBride. It has its moments, but it is not good. It's it's trash movie.
Yeah,
yeah,
it is. It's not.
Yeah, this was that one. This was quite a bit better than Your Highness.
Well, and I think it boils down to that we've talked multiple times about things is that it is a story that can go multiple places. That it's not a Dungeons and Dragons story. It is not a fantasy story. It is a story like the base points of it is a story you can put out and put it almost any era. It is a group of people who are looking to redeem themselves. They have fallen from grace. A father, businessmen, those kind of stuff, people who've lost their spouses and kind of building back from that. And like how low kind of, a little bit of Les Miserables, like how, when you're poor or when you are struggling, how far will you go? Like what is that point? Mm-hmm. So you can pull that out. I mean, granted you have the trappings of fantasy, but those are not what make the movie. So,
well, we were well past our gone. Like half hour
we've gone
on D&D Honor Among Thieves, but yeah, good film. Like I said, far exceeded expectations, better than it has any right to be. Definitely recommend it if you haven't seen it and we just spoiled it and you feel motivated to still watch it, and do it.
Yeah. But watch it again.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously for someone who knows some of the stuff, has read some of the Forgotten Realms and Dragonlance books and has enjoyed them. I really liked it. Got to pick up some things. Ben, having done none of that, also really enjoyed it. So, which is great.
Well, we appreciate you tuning in to Cinema A to B. Mm-hmm. And if you're watching on YouTube, you enjoy the conversation, join in the conversation with a comment and hit the subscribe and the bell. And we thank all of our listeners from all over the globe on the audio-only podcast. Appreciate you. And we will look forward to bringing you a new episode every Monday. Monday morning, they drop on the podcast, and then 2 p.m. Central Standard Time for the YouTube. And that wraps it up. Awesome. Till next time.
Thanks, everybody.